Charlotte Flair's journey into professional wrestling was almost inevitable, given her lineage as the daughter of Ric Flair, one of the most decorated and celebrated wrestlers in history. Born Ashley Elizabeth Flair on April 5th, 1986. She grew up in the imposing shadow of her father's larger-than-life career, yet Charlotte did not immediately pursue wrestling. Instead, she built an athletic foundation elsewhere, excelling as a volleyball player in high school and college. She attended Appalachian State University, playing volleyball at a high level, before eventually transferring to North Carolina State University. Even then, wrestling seemed more a backdrop to her life than a direct calling, with her early adult years focused more on academics and fitness than squared circle competition. By the way, we just hit 4,000 subscribers. Thank you for that, and subscribe now if you haven't, till now. The gravity of the wrestling business eventually pulled her in, however, and in 2012, she signed a developmental deal with WWE, officially reporting to NXT, the company's developmental territory. Despite being green in terms of in-ring experience, her athletic background allowed her to pick up the fundamentals quickly. Her early training under Sarah Del Rey and others at the WWE's Performance Center was intense, as she worked hard to shed the label of being merely Ric Flair's daughter, and instead aimed to carve her own identity. Her debut match in NXT came in 2013 against Bayley, a future rival and cornerstone of the women's division, and Charlotte's natural charisma, combined with her rapidly improving skill set, made her a standout among her peers almost immediately. It didn't take long for Charlotte to ascend to the top of the women's division. At Night of Champions 2015, she defeated Nikki Bella to win the Divas Championship, ending Bella's record-setting reign and officially cementing herself as the new face of the women's division. Her victory was not only significant for her career, but also symbolized a broader shift in WWE's presentation of its female performers. Charlotte's reign as Divas Champion was marked by a growing sense of confidence and arrogance, eventually leading to her turning heel once again, with Ric Flair playing an on-screen role as her manager and mentor. The heel turn allowed Charlotte to develop her character even further, embracing the idea that greatness was her birthright and using her father's legacy as a weapon against her opponents. Throughout late 2015 and into 2016, she defended the Divas Championship against challengers like Paige and Becky Lynch, consistently delivering strong performances and adding layers to her in-ring psychology. When WrestleMania 32 rolled around in April 2016, Charlotte found herself in one of the most significant matches of her career to that point, a triple threat match against Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch for the newly introduced WWE Women's Championship, a title meant to replace the maligned Divas Championship and signal a new era. At WrestleMania 32, Charlotte emerged victorious, winning the new WWE Women's Championship in a match widely praised for its athleticism and importance. Her entrance, complete with a custom robe made from one of Ric Flair's old robes, symbolized the passing of the torch, and her performance in the match elevated her even further in the eyes of fans and critics. Over the next several months, she engaged in heated feuds with Natalya, Sasha Banks, and Paige, with the rivalry against Sasha Banks standing out as particularly special. Charlotte and Sasha traded the Women's Championship back and forth throughout 2016 in a series of groundbreaking matches that included the first ever Women's Hell in a Cell match, the first women's main event on Raw in over a decade, and the first women's match to main event a WWE pay-per-view. The Hell in a Cell match in October 2016 was historic, not just for its placement as the main event, but also for the brutal and physically demanding style of the match itself. Charlotte defeated Sasha Banks to regain the Raw Women's Championship, reinforcing her image as an unstoppable, calculating champion who thrived in high-pressure situations. By the end of 2016, she had already compiled an impressive list of accolades, including multiple title reigns and several firsts for women's wrestling in WWE. Charlotte's momentum continued into 2017 as she dominated the Raw Women's division until the superstar shakeup in April sent her to SmackDown. Her arrival on the blue brand brought immediate legitimacy to the women's division there, and she quickly entered the title picture. She engaged in a rivalry with Naomi, and later became entangled in storylines involving the newly formed group known as the Welcoming Committee. While her initial months on SmackDown were less decorated than her Raw run, her star power never dimmed, and it was only a matter of time before she climbed to the top once again. At Survivor Series 2017, Charlotte faced off against Raw Women's Champion Alexa Bliss in a champion versus champion match, and emerged victorious, further asserting her dominance as the premier female competitor in WWE. She capped off the year by defeating Natalya in a high-stakes lumberjack match at Clash of Champions to retain the SmackDown Women's Championship. These victories solidified her standing as a key figure in WWE's ongoing efforts to present women's wrestling as a credible, legitimate attraction. In early 2018, Charlotte faced one of her most unique challenges when she defended the SmackDown Women's Championship against Asuka at WrestleMania 34. Asuka entered the match undefeated in WWE competition, and many believed she would extend her streak. However, Charlotte delivered one of the best performances of her career, forcing Asuka to tap out and handing the Empress of Tomorrow her first loss in WWE. The victory further burnished Charlotte's credentials as a performer capable of delivering on the biggest stage, and the emotional post-match moment, with Asuka declaring that Charlotte was ready for Asuka, served as a powerful endorsement. Following WrestleMania 34, Charlotte's momentum slowed temporarily as Carmella cashed in her Money in the Bank briefcase to dethrone her, leading to a summer-long absence from the title picture. Nevertheless, Charlotte remained a central figure on SmackDown, and her rivalry with Becky Lynch in late 2018 reignited her character. Initially positioned as the babyface foil to Becky's anti-hero turn, Charlotte found herself getting booed by audiences who overwhelmingly supported Becky. Rather than resist, Charlotte leaned into a more villainous role, embracing the arrogance and entitlement that had characterized her earlier heel runs. Charlotte's rivalry with Becky Lynch culminated in another historic moment, the first ever all-women's pay-per-view, WWE Evolution, where the two competed in a brutal last woman standing match. Charlotte pushed Becky to her limits in a bout that was praised for its storytelling, physicality, and emotional resonance. Although Charlotte came up short, her performance further enhanced her reputation as a pioneer of WWE's women's evolution. As 2019 dawned, Charlotte remained one of the division's top stars. She inserted herself into the burgeoning feud between Becky Lynch and Ronda Rousey, leading to the main event of WrestleMania 35, the first time in history that a women's match headlined WWE's biggest show. In the lead-up to WrestleMania, Charlotte captured the SmackDown Women's Championship by defeating Asuka, further raising the stakes for the triple threat match. Although she did not leave WrestleMania with a title, as Becky Lynch pinned Ronda Rousey to win both the Raw and SmackDown belts, Charlotte's presence in the match elevated it significantly. The remainder of 2019 saw Charlotte remain heavily involved in the women's title scene, capturing her record-tying 10th Women's Championship by defeating Bayley at Hell in a Cell. However, Bayley quickly regained the title, leading to a reinvention of Bayley's character and a fresh dynamic between the two longtime rivals. Charlotte's ability to adapt to new opponents and shifting storylines kept her relevant, even when she wasn't holding championship gold. In 2022, Charlotte spent much of the year as the SmackDown Women's Champion, involved in a lengthy feud with Ronda Rousey that culminated at WrestleMania 38. The decision to have Charlotte retain against Rousey, a global superstar with mainstream appeal, underlines how deeply WWE believes in her value, even against someone who could theoretically attract more casual viewers. The company chose to protect Charlotte, viewing her as the steadier, long-term investment. Her losses to Rousey, later in the year, were framed in such a way that it protected Charlotte's aura, focusing on narrative devices like controversial finishes and injury write-offs, rather than straightforward defeat. Another reason Charlotte wins so often is because WWE operates under the belief that its biggest events require recognizable, made stars, particularly in an era when building new megastars has become more difficult. The company leans heavily on names that casual fans recognize instantly. Charlotte Flair, as the daughter of Ric Flair and a multi-time world champion, fits that mold perfectly. She isn't just another member of the roster. She represents a bridge between eras, old-school lineage and modern-day athleticism fused into one package. Therefore, putting titles on Charlotte or featuring her in key positions feels like a safe bet for WWE's creative decision-makers. When Charlotte returned from another hiatus in late 2022, she once again immediately re-entered the championship scene, defeating Ronda Rousey on SmackDown to capture her 14th recognized women's world title. The match lasted mere minutes, a creative decision that infuriated sections of the fan base, but illustrated again how WWE views Charlotte as a perpetually viable top champion. No long build, no months of storytelling, just a sudden pivot to Charlotte, who could be slotted in at the top without eroding the title's credibility. That's a rare status, one only a handful of male wrestlers even possess, and it speaks to how winning, for Charlotte, is tied as much to the maintenance of her mystique as to her actual in-ring efforts. 2023 brought setbacks as Charlotte suffered a serious knee injury during a match with Asuka in December. Tearing her ACL, MCL, and meniscus could have ended her momentum, but Charlotte's reputation ensured that even during her recovery, she remained a prominent talking point. WWE kept her name alive through promotional material, interviews, and teases about her eventual comeback. Unlike many injured wrestlers who fade from public consciousness, Charlotte's absence was treated almost like a cliffhanger, not an ending, but a pause before the inevitable next act. When she returned at the 2025 Royal Rumble, entering late and winning the entire match, it was a reaffirmation of WWE's core belief in her. No matter how long she's gone, no matter how much the fan base clamors for new faces, Charlotte is seen as indispensable to WWE's image of what a top-tier women's division should look like. Her victory wasn't just about a personal comeback story. It was about reinforcing the idea that Charlotte Flair is still the measuring stick. This philosophy was evident again in the aftermath of her Rumble victory. Charlotte chose to challenge Tiffany Stratton, the reigning WWE Women's Champion, for WrestleMania 41. Stratton represented the new wave of talent, brash, athletic, and on the rise. But Charlotte's pursuit of her championship conveyed that even the new generation had to be validated through battle against Charlotte. The symbolism was clear. To truly be the woman in WWE, you had to go through Charlotte Flair. Although Charlotte ultimately lost to Stratton at WrestleMania, her participation elevated Stratton's reign instantly. In WWE's logic, Charlotte winning is valuable, but so is the rare occasion when she loses, because it's framed as a monumental accomplishment. Her continued dominance post-2025 Royal Rumble reinforces all these ideas. Even after a devastating injury, even after personal turmoil, like her divorce from Andrade, Charlotte reasserted herself immediately as a top star. The company doesn't view her victories as crowd-pleasing surprises or shocking swerves. They see them as inevitable outcomes that reflect the reality of the WWE landscape. Charlotte Flair wins because WWE designed the playing field for her to win, and because she continues to justify that faith every time she steps into the ring. Ultimately, Charlotte Flair's winning record isn't a fluke, nor is it merely a consequence of being Ric Flair's daughter. It's a complex interplay of talent, trust, timing, ambition, and business logic. Charlotte wins because WWE needs her to win. To stabilize their divisions, to project strength, to maintain commercial appeal, and to tell long-term stories that only she can credibly deliver. Every victory is another reaffirmation of her place in wrestling history, not just as the queen of WWE, but as one of the most enduring champions the industry has ever seen. The most immediate reason is the perception of overexposure. Charlotte Flair has been a fixture of the women's division since the moment she debuted on the main roster in 2015. Unlike others who cycled in and out of the spotlight or took periods of reduced focus, Charlotte never seemed to go away. Every major event, WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, Charlotte was either in the main match or heavily featured. Even when storylines didn't logically lead to her involvement, WWE found a way to wedge her in. Fans began to feel that it didn't matter what organic momentum anyone else built. Charlotte was the company's insurance policy, always parachuting in at the expense of newer, fresher faces. Another factor is the constant championship wins. Flair racked up title after title at an astonishing rate, often in situations that felt forced. Fans recognized the pattern early. When someone became popular, Charlotte would beat them, collect another title reign, and reset the division around her. The narrative wasn't about building challengers or growing a division. It became about adding to Charlotte's accolades. By 2025, she was already a 14-time Women's World Champion, a number that felt less impressive and more manufactured. Each reign chipped away at the prestige of her character. What should have been a legendary accomplishment came off to audiences like box checking, a robotic accumulation rather than an emotional journey. WWE's own branding of Charlotte Flair didn't help matters. They leaned heavily into pushing her as the queen, the best, the genetically superior athlete, a woman born to rule over everyone else. In small doses, this arrogance might have worked as heel character development, but the way WWE presented her, it felt less like fiction and more like the company's actual worldview. Charlotte was genetically superior, and therefore the fans should accept her dominance without question. Every promo, every match, every booking decision seemed to reinforce this narrative. After years of the company essentially telling the audience that their cheers and preferences were irrelevant compared to Charlotte's supposed destiny, resentment hardened into hatred. Her connection to Ric Flair created another layer of disdain. While legacy wrestlers often draw a measure of goodwill, Charlotte's lineage felt weaponized. Commentary hammered constantly on her being Ric Flair's daughter. WWE rarely allowed her to establish her own identity beyond that connection. Even when she tried to move away from it, the marketing machine dragged her back into it. Fans grew tired of hearing the same origin story regurgitated, tired of the cheap pops whenever Ric made a cameo, tired of the insinuation that her success was inevitable because of her last name. Fairly or unfairly, many fans concluded that she was handed opportunities others had to scratch and claw for. There's also the complicated gender dynamic at play. In the women's division, where opportunities were historically few and far between, Charlotte's monopolization of attention became even more grating. When fans watched Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch, Bayley, or Asuka fight to get screen time, only for Charlotte to waltz in and take the spotlight, it felt like a betrayal of the supposed women's evolution. Instead of lifting all boats, WWE seemed content with spotlighting only one woman, the one with the right family name and corporate polish. That sense of injustice lingered and magnified over time. The way Charlotte was booked against fan favorites only deepened the divide. Time and time again, grassroots fan momentum was derailed by her victories. Whether it was Asuka's undefeated streak ending at WrestleMania 34, Bianca Belair getting overshadowed during critical moments, or Rhea Ripley losing her NXT championship at a time when she was poised to be a generational star, Charlotte seemed like the embodiment of WWE's unwillingness to listen to its audience. Every instance became another scar, another grievance added to the collective memory. Fans began to see Charlotte not just as a character, but as a symbol of WWE's disregard for their voices. Her character work, ironically, exacerbated the hatred. When Charlotte played a babyface, she struggled to generate genuine sympathy. Her natural demeanor, proud, intense, almost regal, didn't lend itself well to portraying an underdog or a relatable hero. Audiences could smell the inauthenticity from miles away. WWE's insistence on portraying her as a valiant face only made things worse, because it created a jarring dissonance between what the company wanted fans to feel and what they actually felt. Even when she turned heel, her promos often veered into the territory of self-congratulatory monologues that felt more like shoot comments about her real-life superiority than character-driven boasts. Instead of reveling in the booing, as great heels do, she often seemed defensive and cold. Deeple. Her character work, ironically, exacerbated the hatred. When Charlotte played a babyface, she struggled to generate genuine sympathy. Her natural demeanor, proud, intense, almost regal, didn't lend itself well to portraying an underdog or a relatable hero. Audiences could smell the inauthenticity from miles away. WWE's insistence on portraying her as a valiant face only made things worse, because it created a jarring dissonance between what the company wanted fans to feel and what they actually felt. Even when she turned heel, her promos often veered into the territory of self-congratulatory monologues that felt more like shoot comments about her real-life superiority than character-driven boasts. Instead of reveling in the booing, as great heels do, she often seemed defensive and cold, deepening the emotional disconnect. Her in-ring style, while technically proficient, became another source of irritation. Charlotte is undeniably athletic, capable of hitting moonsaults and executing complex sequences. But fans criticized her for being mechanical. Many felt that her matches followed a formula, that she prioritized hitting her signature moves cleanly over telling a compelling story. Particularly in big matches, it often felt like the bout was structured to make Charlotte look like a superhuman, with opponents having to wrestle around her strengths. There was a sterile quality to her performances, a sense that they were choreographed exhibitions rather than emotional battles that kept audiences from investing fully. Finally, there's the reality that Charlotte Flair, for all her undeniable skills, never felt like she needed the fans. The best wrestlers, even as heels, maintain a symbiotic relationship with the audience. They understand that the boos and cheers are oxygen. Charlotte often projected an aura that she would be a star whether the fans cared or not. That indifference, real or kayfabe, alienated people. In a world where fans want to believe their reactions matter, Charlotte made them feel irrelevant.